So good morning, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Deborah Ross from the 2nd Congressional District in North Carolina, home of many documented dreamers. Thank you for coming out today to address such an important issue. And I'd like to thank all those here for joining us, including Senator Padilla, who's our champion on the Senate side, Representative Bera, and we're also joined by one of our new freshmen from California who is unbelievable. I'd like to give a big welcome to this incredible group of young people joining us today. They are the children of long-term visa holders, also known as the documented dreamers. And they've come to Washington to advocate for themselves and for their families. They're Americans in every respect except on paper. And there's nothing more American than advocating for change. And that is what they've been doing for the last few years. Today, Senator Padilla and I are reintroducing our bipartisan, bicameral legislation, the America's Children's Act, to protect these inspiring young people from being forced to leave the only country they've ever known. We worked closely with the advocates here today to craft legislation to fix one of the many deep flaws embedded in our broken immigration system. Documented dreamers grow up in American communities. They attend American schools. They learn along American children. Their parents pay taxes to our country, and they love our country and want to give back to the people and places that raised them. For many young Americans, turning 21 is a wonderful celebration of adulthood. But for documented dreamers, turning 21 means aging out of their visas because of the decades-long visa backlog and facing an impossible choice: to stay in the United States without legal status, or to leave family, friends, and jobs to return to countries they barely remember. The American Children's Act will permanently end aging out and provide a pathway to permanent residency for the children of long-term visa holders in the United States. The advocates who are with us today represent more than 250,000 documented dreamers across the country who are living in limbo, struggling to find a pathway to permanent residency and wondering whether they will be deported. Last Congress, we almost got protection for the documented dreamers over the finish line, passing provisions out of the House in the NDAA and the American Dream and Promise Act. In a few moments, we'll hear directly from several of the documented dreamers with us today about how our country's dysfunctional immigration system has impacted their lives. The American people are tired of divisive and extreme policies coming out of Washington. They want real bipartisan solutions. And the America's Children's Act is one bicameral, bipartisan solution we must pursue. For too long, these young people have been left out of discussions about immigration reform in Congress, and all of us here are ready to change that. Today, I'm proud to stand with them. They've worked so hard to draw attention to their challenging circumstances and to advocate for a common sense solution. It's been a privilege to work with them, and I know that this legislation will have a positive effect on their lives. Documented dreamers simply represent the very best of America. Let's give them a chance to stay in the country they love and call home. Now, I'd like to introduce my colleague and friend, the Senate sponsor and champion of the America's Children's Act, Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Congresswoman, so much for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for your commitment, and your advocacy, we are going to get this done. We are going to get this done. I want to thank Improve the Dream and my colleagues in the House of Representatives and all the documented dreamers in attendance here today. And in particular for those who are sharing their stories, because there's no stronger case for why this measure needs to pass than to hear the personal stories of folks who are impacted by this broken law. Now, as a proud son of immigrants, I want to thank every single one of you who came out to protect documented dreamers. But just as important as an American and as a senator, I think it's important to say thank you for sharing your stories and for calling on us to live up to our moral obligation as a nation of immigrants to fix our outdated immigration system. Every story told today should shock the conscience of every member of Congress. These documented dreamers, the sons and daughters of long-term visa holders, are Americans in every way except one. I'll put it slightly differently, Congresswoman. Their parents' green card is caught up in red tape. It's not their fault. Across the country, 250,000 of these young people were brought here legally as children, grew up here, went to school here, and lived like any other normal child or teenager or young adult. Yet eventually they face a choice their classmates could never imagine. Do you self-deport and leave your family behind for a country you may not even remember? Or stay in the United States and live undocumented in the shadows? Now, there's many areas where within the immigration policy where Democrats and Republicans clearly do not agree. But this isn't one of them. And I challenge any senator to hear the stories of our documented dreamers today and then try to make the argument that deporting them is in our national interest. It's not. In fact, by forcing documented dreamers to self-deport, we're actually hurting our national interest. These documented dreamers are overwhelmingly graduates in STEM fields where we have a shortage in the STEM workforce. We put them in a position of taking their education, their training, their talents to countries and to companies abroad. And this is more than just about immigration reform. This is about righting a moral wrong that's a byproduct of our outdated immigration system. And it's about protecting something as sacred and as universal as the American dream. A year ago, I served as chair of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration. We held a hearing on some of the main barriers to legal migration. And one of our witnesses that day, a documented dreamer, delivered her heartfelt testimony and sparked a moment of genuine bipartisan support by my colleagues in the Senate. The ranking member of the subcommittee is Senator Cornyn from Texas, who committed publicly, it's on tape, to work together towards meaningful legislation to help documented dreamers. And that's why I still have hope for these young people today. And that's why my bill, the America's Children, the America's Children Act, is supported by both Democrats and Republicans. The list of Republican supporters is growing, slowly, but it's growing, and we're going to get there. Because they too know the great moral failure our nation commits every time a person who has grown up in the United States is forced to leave the country. My bill would prevent these young people from aging out of their parents' visa when they turn 21 and create additional green card opportunities for documented dreamers. And it would finally end their nightmare. It would finally protect their dreams and finally correct the conscience of our country. I urge my colleagues to join us, to stand up, to do what's right. join this bipartisan group of senators and do the right thing for the hundreds of thousands of young Americans. Thank you very much. Now let me introduce my colleague from California, Representative Ami Bera. Nice suit, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you're asking yourself, who's this old guy standing back there with all these documented dreamers? Look at how beautiful they are, right? This is the tapestry of America, who we are as a country. This fabric of different cultures, different ethnicities, different religions. That is who we are, and that's what makes this country great. The reason why I was standing with them is their story is my story. As Senator said, I'm also a son of immigrants. My parents immigrated here from India in the 1950s. By fate, I happened to be born here, but my older brother came with my mom as a 3-year-old from India. We were lucky, but we could have been documented dreamers and we could have ripped the family apart. That isn't who we are. I hear my colleagues sometimes say, well, we want folks to apply for immigration and come here in a legal way. Well, that's what they did. They followed the rules. They came here with their parents. It's not their fault that we have a broken immigration system and a bureaucracy and a backlog. Let's come together as Democrats and Republicans. Let's build on the foundation of who we are as a nation. We are a nation of immigrants. Let's embrace that. That's what makes America great. And let's fix this. That's why I'm so proud to stand here with Senator Padilla, Congresswoman Ross, Congresswoman Kamlager, because their leadership and really the leadership of the young men and women that are standing behind us, telling their stories of America, telling their stories of a future that they hope to be part of. That's what this is about. Now, let's not just stop with the documented dreamers. Let's protect all dreamers, and we're going to work on that in this Congress, and we're going to get that done. So let's build on the strength and the beauty of that tapestry that is the United States of America, and that is that tapestry that's right behind me today. So I'm proud to stand with the Senator and the Congresswomen, and we're going to get this done in this Congress, and you guys are going to be that proud future that we want for the United States of America. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Deep Patel, and I'm delighted to be here today with Congresswoman Deborah Ross, Senator Padilla, Congressman Bera, and dozens of documented dreamers from Improve the Dream who have come here today from all across the country. We are so grateful for them championing this legislation and also for Senator Paul and Congresswoman Miller-Meeks for joining them as well. In 2005, my parents immigrated to the United States to start a small business to give our family the best opportunity to succeed. We made America our home. This country raised me, educated me, and has made me who I am today. Despite living here lawfully for almost 2 decades, we still have not received permanent resident status. This is something that resonates with everyone standing here and over 250,000 others. A loophole in our system is forcing American-raised and educated children to be forced to leave when they turn 21. One thing all of us have in common is at one point we've been asked, why don't you just apply for citizenship? Most Americans don't realize that it's possible for an immigrant child to be brought here legally, be raised and educated here, but still not have a clear path to citizenship. And unfortunately, this is because our system has no mechanism in place to do that. The decades spent growing up here are rendered useless in the eyes of the immigration system when we age out at 21. The individuals standing with me today came here at an average age of 5 and have been living in the United States for an average of 16 years. And of the 250,000, 90% are STEM degree holders. Over the past several years, I've had the privilege of getting to know and work with some of the most hardworking and passionate individuals. But it pains me to have to see so many self-deport year after year because change is yet to be made. 4 years ago, a son of a dairy farmer had to self-deport after having been here for 19 years since the age of 2. 2 years ago, a nursing graduate who had been here for almost 2 decades was forced to self-deport in the midst of the COVID pandemic and a nursing shortage. This year, 10,000 more will face the same fate. This does not make any sense for us, our families, or our country. And that is why we need America's Children Act, which is legislation that most Americans would assume is already a reality. Over the past 2 years, we have heard compelling testimonies in both the House and the Senate Judiciary Committees, and have received tremendous support from Republicans, Democrats, and independents. Delay in solving this loophole will not only fail people like us, but it will fail America by depriving it of the contributions of the children it raised and educated. Improve the Dream is not just a movement for us or for immigrants. It is a movement for America. Ending aging out will empower people to tap into their potential, talents, and ambitions, helping us and our country reach our fullest potential. And that won't be possible if we continue to waste the product of our country's investments by forcing American-raised and educated children to leave every year. It is time to permanently end aging out and pass America's Children Act. Thank you. I'm now going to introduce Lawrence Van Beek, who's a computer scientist from Iowa.
Hello, my name is Lawrence Van Beek, as Deep mentioned, and I grew up in Iowa City. I moved to the United States at the age of 7 in 2005 with my parents. My father is a jeweler, which, in case you don't know, it's a very uncommon trade nowadays to have a jeweler working his own store. So it's something that he's always loved doing, and it's something that love for his job is what drove me to pursue something I enjoy doing, which is software development. So in 2019, when I graduated from the University of Iowa with a bachelor's in computer science, I accepted a full-time position at Integrated DNA Technologies, where I work as a software engineer. And I assumed, like many people here, that even after going to elementary school, junior high, high school, the university, that I would be able to find a job, and I made it. That's the goal in life. Get your degree, get a job, and you made it. But that isn't our endpoint. Just because I had a job did not mean that I was able to stay here. I got my own degree after I was my own visa after I was no longer able to be dependent on my parents after I turned 21. On that visa, I was able to work for 36 months after my graduation. However, unless I found another visa, I would have to self-deport, which I did have to do. In July of last year, my OPT status expired, and after 3 failed attempts at the H-1B lottery, I had to leave. So I had to pack up my entire life, everything that I ever knew, all of my friends, leave my parents behind, my dogs, and I had to move to a country that I hadn't stepped foot in since I was 7 years old. I was, however, fortunate enough that I have an employer who has a European facility that they allowed me to continue to work through. I was also fortunate enough to still speak the language of the country that I was born in. But plenty of children that are going through this don't have those luxuries. And they go back a stranger in the land that they're supposed to now call their home after being forced to leave their home that they grew up in. And that is not fair to any of these kids, including myself, and any of the future kids that are going to go through this. Imagine sending your child to a country that they don't know the language, they don't know anybody, they're starting with nothing, no job, no anything. That's not something you want to do for your children, I would hope, and I would assume, and I think that that's something that's reasonable to ask as children that are going to have to do that, for us not to have to do that either. So I just really am thankful for all the work that the senators and the congressmen and women are doing for us. And I really want to give a special shout out to Congresswoman Miller-Meeks, who has been kind of my personal champion throughout this whole issue. So I wanted to pass it off to Mary Joseph, who is a medical student from Utah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Joseph, and I'm really grateful to be able to share my story as a documented dreamer. My family and I came to the United States when I was 10 years old, and we've been blessed to call Utah our home ever since. Growing up, my parents always emphasized the importance of hard work and giving back to my community. And it was perhaps this service mentality that motivated me to volunteer throughout middle school at the Catholic church I went to, and then in high school to clean patients' rooms at my local hospital. When I started college at the University of Utah, I found it really fulfilling to help alongside social workers at the hospital to serve patients, and slowly began to better understand the needs of my local Utah community. Watching the tireless compassion and dedication by these physicians to serve and care for their patients really inspired me to also pursue medicine, with hopes that I too would have the privilege of one day to take care of patients and help them navigate our American healthcare system. But halfway through my junior year in college, when I turned 21, I aged out of my family's green card application and subsequently my H-4 dependent visa that was allowing me to stay in this country. Being stuck in this immigration limbo definitely took a toll on my mental health. But despite all the stress and uncertainty I faced, I decided not to give up on my dream to become a physician and serve in this country. So I went through the intense and stressful process of switching over to an international student visa just so I could finish my bachelor's degree, and continued to work hard, believing that if I gave it my all to serve my country, then I too eventually would be able to call the United States of America my permanent home. Today, I am a third-year medical student at the University of Utah. But in less than 2 years, when I graduate and become the first in my family to get a medical degree, I will also face the grim prospect of no longer having a student visa that I can stay in this country in, and having to self-deport from the only place I've ever known as home. It's really disheartening to think that after all this investment of time, resources, money that has been poured into my education and my upbringing by this country, I won't even be able to have the opportunity or the ability to work here as a doctor. And this is during the time that our country is facing a growing shortage of healthcare professionals. All of us standing here today have had immense positive impacts in the communities and states that have raised us. And we want to continue to contribute to this great nation. All we ask is for this country to finally recognize us and ensure through the America's Children Act a certain future for all of us in the only place that we consider home. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Muhil Ravichandran, a documented dreamer from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mary. Good morning, everyone. My name is Muhil Ravichandran, and it is an honor to be here today to share my story. I am 25 years old, and I am a documented dreamer. Growing up here in the United States, I had the privilege of having a diverse childhood. I first came here with my family when I was just 2 years old, and I went to preschool in California. We later moved to Illinois, where I went to elementary school. This is where I first learned how to swim, played the flute in my school band, and spent my summers visiting national parks and museums. My parents reminded us that every day in this country is a blessing. They also dreamed that one day I would graduate from college and have access to the incredible opportunities that this country has to offer. Growing up, I felt American in every way. It was only when it was time to apply to colleges that I began to understand the complexity of my visa status. Even though I went to middle school and high school in New Jersey, I was considered to be an international student at Rutgers University. This meant I did not have access to in-state tuition, financial aid, and most scholarships. It was challenging to make the most of my college experience without having access to the same opportunities that my classmates did. When everyone else pursued internships and gained valuable work experiences, I was left behind, simply due to my visa status. After graduating from pharmacy school, I worked at a research company for the last year. My company applied for the H-1B work visa lottery, and my future in this country was left to chance. Unfortunately, I was not selected. Now, I have to self-deport from the country that I've been calling home for almost 2 decades. This also means having to leave my family because they recently received their green cards, but I aged out at 21. It is heartbreaking that I have to spend every day in fear that I have to leave my home simply because I aged out. However, I am here today alongside other documented dreamers because we believe that together we can instill real change. We believe in the American dream, and more than anything, we want to give back to the communities that raised us and make our contributions to this country. On behalf of Improve the Dream, we would like to thank Congresswoman Ross, Senator Padilla, and Congressman Bera for your continued support. Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for sharing your stories. You are so, so inspiring to all of us. I know that we're running over a little bit more than 10 minutes, but we have time for a few questions if anybody has any questions. Yes. Yes. So we've introduced a standalone bill, but we are very flexible for any vehicle that can get this done. And the really wonderful thing, and I think Senator Padilla emphasized it, is that this is a bipartisan, bicameral bill. We have added Republicans on the House side to it. He has his ranking member in favor of it. So whoever moves immigration issues forward, these types of immigration issues forward, we're for it. Nobody's going to fight between the House and the Senate. We just want to get it done.
Where are you in terms of votes right now?
We definitely would have the votes if it was put on the floor. Certainly in the House, because we have more than 5 Republicans who have signed on. And as you heard from Senator Padilla, he's really working the Republican conference to make sure that he has those 10 votes to avoid the filibuster. I have not personally talked to McCarthy, but my co-sponsors, Congresswoman Miller-Meeks, who I've worked on this with, for both, we started doing this as freshmen, and she has worked her conference like nobody's business about it. And she does it for her constituents.
Are there any specific changes to this version of the bill from last Congress, and what areas are you willing to be flexible and maybe
That's a great question. So we learned a lot along the way. There are a couple of changes. One of the changes requires the documented dreamer to have been in this country for a longer period of time than the original bill. The original bill was only 4 years. Now it's up to 10 years with 8 years on a visa. And that was something that the Senate wanted. We've also made sure that we can extend permanent resident status to college graduates. And there have been bills that have been introduced that have said, if you graduate, you should just get a green card. And so we've been working through the NDAA process to make sure that we do things that will be acceptable to the Senate, because again, they need to get those 10 Republican votes. But we're very optimistic because, as I said, we've been adding senators and House members. And we've also been adding Democratic House members. I think my colleague left, but freshman Democratic House members. So, yes, ma'am.
Do you think the divisive, politically heated environment around immigration right now is going to hurt the momentum of this legislation?
I think the divisive, heated rhetoric about immigration has hurt our country. And that's why we haven't gotten comprehensive immigration reform. But because this has so much bipartisan support, I'm confident that any package that does pass will include it.
Are all the same Republicans who supported this during the last session, are they all back on
Yeah,
board?
they are back on board, and we're adding. Yeah, particularly in the House. And I really want to give a shout out to Congresswoman Miller-Meeks. She has been an absolute champion and working her conference like nobody's business on this bill. And then again, Cornyn on the Senate side, and Rand Paul has been very, very publicly supportive of this. He is Senator Padilla's co-lead. So we're covering our bases. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you especially to these amazing young people who are going to be petitioning the government for redress of their grievances. And that's the American way. Have a great day.